Thank you for inviting me, and I love the intimacy of our group here, and that we have this quality time together. I think that's also very special. So thank you so much for making space for this conversation. And I was thinking about this, one big idea, and of course, being a person of many possibilities, I find the question very provocative. And slightly stressful, because I like it. I like to think that I have more than one big idea, but I did give a little bit of thought about it, and so I hope that what I have to offer will sort of cohere in my time with you. And I know that I have 15 minutes, but I'm assuming that I might go a little bit over, and Jeff, if you need to stop me, you'll stop me, right? So. But I was thinking about, so I want to tell you a story, because I think a story might be a really good way into what I want to share with you. So when I was born in the United States. My parents were displaced from Palestine. My father in his early 30s, and then my mother in her very early 20s. And they were an arranged marriage, and I was the product of their arranged marriage. I'm the firstborn 9 months after they were married, so we know that something happened. And then when I was 2 years old, and my sister was born, we had the opportunity to go to Greece, and in those 2 years, my parents' families all moved to Greece too, because we're Greek Orthodox, and they gave refuge to Greek Orthodox. So all this to say is that I lived, part of my childhood was in Greece, and I remember I must have been, I don't know, maybe, let's say I was 7, a precocious 7-year-old. And my father, on Sundays, we would take an adventure. So my dad, on Sundays, we did the Sunday adventure, and the adventure was either we would meet a family in somewhere and have lunch together, or we would go and visit an ancient ruin. We were living on the island of Crete and then on mainland Athens. But one year, he took us on an excursion to Mount Olympus. And I was reading mythology at the time. And I was reading all about the gods. And I was also reading at the same time 1001 Arabian Nights. And I don't know why, but somehow the mythology of the Greeks and the mythology of the Mongols and Persians and those areas were starting to converge in my mind. And I love to escape my parents and go into the caverns and the caves. And so somehow I escaped, and I was in one of these little caverns inside the mountain. And, there was, lots of people and tourists and things like that. But I found myself in this kind of little cave by myself. And I heard my name being called. And at first I thought it was Zeus. I'm sure that Zeus is calling my name. I'm in the mountain. And Zeus must be calling my name. So I was listening to this, Aliki, Aliki, Aliki. And I was like, that voice is coming from the mountain. I am sure that I have been the chosen one. And the next thing that happens is my dad comes behind me and says, Aliki, where have you been? And I said, Zeus has been talking to me. And my father, who, was like, we thought you were lost, whatever, pulled me out. That was the joke. But there is a way in which I have felt that there is a power in the mystery of our minds, and that we can really learn our way into any one of those mysteries. So even though there was no so real Zeus, right, probably, the spirit of Zeus, or the spirit of, for me, the Greek gods and the mythology, is all about alchemy. And alchemy, which is a very ancient attempt to transform certain properties into other properties. Let's just reduce the complexity and say that alchemy is a process of transformation. And the gods were alchemists. And I would like to liken myself as an alchemist, not a god, but an alchemist who uses learning is my medium. And I believe from a very, very, very young age that learning could make anything and everything different. I have believed it. I have practiced it. I have researched it. I live this idea that learning makes things different. And so as I have grown in my capacity as a researcher, I started to play with this idea, well, what can we name learning? Like what name can we give learning that can be alchemical, right? And alchemy, let's just back up for a second, is yes a transformation of something into something different, right? So it's that. But alchemy also assumes that what becomes different makes a difference, right? So it's not enough to treat, so the old alchemy was turn like iron into gold, and then gold would make you rich. But that's a very thin notion of alchemy. The thicker notion of alchemy, which by the way, I would say healers, shaman and women, indigenous people, people of variety of faiths, just people who have always been in the movement of how do we make ourselves and society be places where we can be happy, where we can be thriving, where we can make things good for each other. Like these are simple ideas, but very complex. So alchemy is about making those kinds of differences that really allow for us to have a kind of mutuality, right? So mutuality is not reciprocity, like I'll do something for you if you do something for me. Mutuality is I will do all of me so that you can become all of you, so that we can create spaces where we can make things different. And I believe that the alchemical property of that mutual possibility is learning, and specifically adult learning. And so when I went into my research and these ideas, and I was, how do we do this? Many, many years into, so now I'm 13 years into an academic role, and when I started my journey as an academic, I knew that learning was going to be at the heart of it, and that transformation would play a role. But the thing that really rose to the surface was that learning and transformation are possible, but we need to name it something different. And I called it generative knowing. So generative knowing is my big idea about the alchemy that is possible through learning, right? Because learning can be many things, right? Learning can be acquisition of knowledge. Learning can be the application of knowledge. Learning can be the creation of knowledge. Learning can be the problem solving of a situation, right? Like learning is this amazing, mysterious force in the world that can make many different things. And the thing that I'm much interested, really interested, is how does a particular facet of learning, this generative facet of learning, make a kind of difference that allows for multiple possibilities and potentials to find life? Because I believe that possibilities and potentials are how alchemy manifests in the world, right? So if learning is the mechanism for alchemy, then possibilities and potentials are the outcomes of the kind of alchemy that I'm calling generative knowing. And that is amazing, right? That's amazing. That's godly. That's Zeus, Thunderbolt style, right? So there's the kind of difference that I think alchemy can produce that is from knowing that is in a continuously becoming. So I've used this terminology, becoming. All that becoming denotes is that something doesn't need to come to a particular end, but it can come to a particular form and then become something different again. That's a different way of thinking about how learning and knowing traffic. But another way to think about it, so here's another story. So another story is that I was fascinated with the 1001 Arabian Nights. Isn't that the correct title? I can't believe I can't think of it. Shahrazad. Shahrazad was basically a slave. And she was basically a sex slave, but anyway. And she was very clever. And her role in the court of the king, let's put it this way, was that she could survive as long as she could tell a really good story. And so she told 1001 stories. And it made me think about how powerful our ability to tell, retell, untell, make new our stories. And that another part of generative knowing, in addition to it making something different, is that we carry with us our lineages, our stories, and that these lineages and these stories become the fertile ground, if you will, for how alchemy can happen. So now we have alchemy that makes things different, learning in the form of generative knowing as the process for making a difference, and then within each of us and between us, the lineages and stories we carry with us become the combining, right, or the fertile soil or data, if you will, that can make that difference stick. So that's interesting, right? Because now we have not just a process, right? We have a context of which we are part of. We have many possibilities which we can unleash. And we have the potential that those possibilities can make a difference. So now we're looking at a structure of learning that's not merely knowledge. That's good, but it's not enough. It's not merely acquisition or application or implication, but it has now a whole structure of potentiality that can generate lots and lots of new things. And that's the thing that I'm really curious about, is how do we start to bring our lineages, our stories, combining them in ways that can start to generate new ways of telling and retelling and knowing ourselves and each other that will lead to making new structures in our communities, in our institutions, in our societies, in PhD education, that will unleash multiple possibilities. Now, that's not a bad job for learning, right? That's not bad. If we can create the conditions, and I think we're starting to realize, like, oh, there are these multiple conditions that live within us, between us, in this larger context, how we combine them, how we release them, and how we believe in the mystery of the possibility of something becoming different, then that is the difference that we get to make. And in our field, by the way, as an applied social science field, all of us are passionate about making a difference. And a difference at multiple levels for a long term. That's what our field is all about. That's what we produce in the world. And you are, I don't know what the right term, like you are the holders, the lineage holders of that possibility, right? Because Karen and I, we have possibilities, but we're limited because we're in this structure. We've made that choice. This is our structural home. We have lots of ways in which our possibilities go out into the world, our research, our writing, our projects, our mentoring. But you really are the ones who take this vehicle, take this idea, and bring it to the world, right? Without you, I cannot unleash the multiple possibilities of potentialities. We must be in combination. We must combine. We must do the hard work to find how our fertile grounds can make things different. And that, to me, is a different way of thinking about PhD education and our role in your learning and growth and development and what I'm preparing you for. That's what I'm preparing you for, to be a possibility creator in the context in which you find yourselves in. And that is my one big idea.